Everybody, and welcome to a very exciting and I want to use the word endearing. I find it very comfortable, at least. Uh, a new episode. We'll just say a new episode of Words, Images, and Worlds. My name is Jason, but I'm also talking with a Jason in this case, and that is Jason Walz. Welcome, welcome, Jason.
Thank you. There's a lot of Jasons out there around our age, is what I'm finding.
I went to school. My class that I went through most of grade school and middle school with was like 30 kids, and there were at least three Jasons. It was
Yeah,
incredibly popular
I
as
was
a name.
apparently named after a soap opera character.
E2.
Okay, it must be a big deal then. Yeah,
Yeah.
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 I don't know who it was. I've never looked into it, but who knows?
Same. Yeah, same. My mom was a soap opera fan, and
Uh-huh.
so that's where the name came from. But yeah,
There you
yeah.
go. We'll figure it out
That's it. That's it.
next
Lots of
podcast.
Bellas about to be in the world that are in the world. Lots of Katnisses out there, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you and I have talked before, and for folks out there that are listening to this that have stumbled upon this episode, it mostly is aimed toward educators, but certainly readers, people that enjoy comics and all sorts of books can stumble on. The thing that I know you best for is Last Pick, the Last Pick series, and then you also have Story for Desmond, Homesick, both of which are beautiful and lovely books that are out there in some form. But we've also connected because during the early days of the pandemic, I was hosting Zooms with some folks that I was working with at Appalachian State, and you were kind enough to jump somewhere. There's a screenshot of you jumping in and teaching art and teaching sort of a way of organizing characters through that Zoom space that was so new to so many of us then.
Yeah, that was a strange time. So I was going like everybody else figuring out how to do work from home or not from home. My wife was working here. My kids were going to school here at the house. But we didn't even have enough bandwidth to do all that internet for me to work from here also and teach because I was teaching full time then. So I was still going into our school building and I was literally the only person there. There would be
Yep.
the sometimes the principal, but somebody was there to let me in, and I was in an empty classroom in an empty building teaching my classes, and then
Mhm.
hungry to teach anything else, just to sort of tamper my own sort of anxiety about how it felt to be in an empty classroom during a pandemic where the George Floyd protests for his murder were happening just out front of our block.
Oh
So
yeah.
all that to say, I really enjoyed the chance to join up with your class. Yeah.
Well, it was great having you and those times of connecting because it was such a strange time. We couldn't even get to our classrooms and offices. They sort of put the barriers up and said, "Come get what you need and don't come back."
Yeah.
So it was a very strange time. Um, and so all of that to say, you and I have connected in a couple of spaces, and I've been fortunate enough to talk with you a few times and share your work out. I have some words from you in a book that is hopefully making some final rounds at NCTE, and then you've been on the blog, and now we have this nice podcast space together as
Yeah.
well.
Love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm excited about the book, by the way.
Oh,
Your
yeah, same,
Yeah.
same.
Yeah.
I'm excited about your book. I'm excited to see because as I'm talking about the world that we've lived in, I'm thinking about how the world was essentially turned upside down. And you crafted that and are crafting that, I suppose, in a very visual sort of sensibility.
Yeah. So what I'm working on now, it's called The Flip Side. It was all coming to me during the pandemic. Right before the pandemic, my best friend died of cancer, Chris, and he had a short story about a world that turns upside down. Literally everything not attached falls off of Earth. And his story is about a dad who was not a particularly good dad, just trying to keep his two kids alive in this world. Um, we kept trying to work together to do something with it, but it was so much his story. Then he died, and after mid-pandemic, it hit me that like that idea of the world turning upside down was not only how I was feeling about the world in general, but specifically about a friend losing a friend. So ran with that metaphor I mean, losing anyone, but losing a friend is tricky because I feel like there's a lot of sort of social norms and social rules for if you lose a spouse or God forbid a child or a child parent. Like there's these understandings of like how awful that is and how to support. But I think a friend, losing a friend, is the kind of thing that sort of gets forgotten. That sort of support that's needed, maybe not treated in the same way, right or wrong. So I was thinking about a lot of young people losing other people in their lives in the pandemic, my own loss. So yeah, it's I'm on the last chapter of inking that right now. It's going to be big, could be a few hundred pages. I'm really proud of it. At the same time, I'm ready to be done because it was a really hard one. It's been kind of brutal to stay in that space the whole time about depression and loss. But again, super proud of it. I can't help but throw in a ton of monsters, which makes it a lot lighter, but that just seems to be my go-to all the time. Uh, yeah, but that's going to come out sometime in 2024. We don't have a date for it yet.
And is it Puffin? Is that right?
That it's going to be through Macmillan.
Okay,
Pippin,
Macmillan.
yep, Pippin is the my agency for it. I don't know if that's what you're thinking of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that must be it. Yeah.
No, sorry, Penguin. Penguin. This one's going out through Penguin.
Okay, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And a puffin is a small penguin, so
Yeah, it is. And
we're somewhere in the department.
I get confused of all the subsidiaries. So yeah, I'm Penguin, but I think it's called Rocky Pond. It's a newer sort of YA. But again, I get kind of confused on all of the subsets of the publishing industry now. Yeah.
Um, was it a healing process to go through the book, or has it been a healing process in some
That's
times?
interesting. Yeah, I've been asked that before. So my first book to be published was Homesick, and it was about losing my mom to cancer. And the short answer to that one is like, yes, it definitely was. It was very much, did not expect to get it published. I was just like, I asked my wife, I was like, could I take some time off from work just to focus on this? And I did, and really proud of it. And I was at a different place when I finished it. Was this one a healing process? I don't know. Since that first book came out 15 years ago, whatever, and doing this, I am more neurotic. I have become, and I think the last few years probably contributed to that. So that's something I've learned about myself is that if I'm going to live in a story that's pretty heavy, it kind of stays in me. Um, so it didn't necessarily hurt me, but I don't think it did me a ton of favors either. Just to sort of live in that idea of like, what does it feel like to be in depression, to be in loss? So my next one after this is going to be a straightforward rom-com is what I'm going for here. I'm already working out the details on it.
Glad to hear there's a plan for a follow-up project, but also, um, yeah, it's good to be good to yourself creatively and
Yeah.
go, okay, I just went through this. Now I'm going to do this kind of project. And yeah, I imagine a lot of people out there are going through a lot of different experiences of just like, what was this the past few years
Yeah.
and loss. My wife and I both being educators know, sometimes the impact that losing people takes on young people in particular. So I think it'll be an enjoyable book from someone who enjoys the fantasy and science fiction possibilities, but then also something that speaks to people at the same time.
Yeah, I'm definitely hoping. I think I got to work on pitching this book better. It is, I think, going to be a ton of fun. But I did really want to speak to something pretty heavy at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's cool that books can do that. You can tackle things and enjoy the process too, and enjoy
Yeah.
the journey.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And I've seen the social media posts. I think the one that sticks in my mind, other than the initial pieces, where you had a piece, and I'm gonna butcher the terms because I'm not an expert on the craft, but there was some like ink bleeding kind of
Yeah.
technique that you were
Yeah, that
using.
sounds right to me. Yeah.
Okay, okay, great, great. And it looked amazing, and I thought, well, I mean, that certainly evokes, a certain tone, and I'm looking forward to the fact that you have some monsters in there because I've shown your sketch school as part of class too.
Oh yeah, that's right. Forgot about that. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I love monsters. I can't help it. Um, yeah, it's something I talk about a lot. I go to schools and I talk to young people a lot, and part of what I touch on is especially when I'm talking to middle schoolers, like there's that time, maybe fifth grade, where people who want to be creative or want to continue to be creative at that age, like there's something happening in your brain then that the stuff you're really into is starting to lock in and shape the stories you're going to probably tell the rest of your life. That doesn't mean you can't change and grow and everything. But I guess from personal experience, like middle school, that's what it was for me. Like it was a bunch of things happened. I grew up in the middle of nowhere, Kentucky, like isolated, but we got a spinner rack, and the spinner rack is like old fashioned way to get comic books over by at the like checkout lane. Yeah, there was literally a rack that would spin around. They'd have like the monthly comics, and I could start getting. And one of my first comics I got was like Spider-Man in the black suit, which I thought was just aesthetically like really cool looking. And then it becomes Venom. So like middle school Jason was all in on that. Like just that was the best. But then like Return of the Jedi came out, Ghostbusters, Clash of the Titans, like all these things that everyone in the world loved, but I didn't know that. It was before internet. It just felt like these were like super special to me. All that to say, like I can't. Anytime I try to write a story without a monster, it just finds its way in every time. Like it's in my DNA. Science fiction.
I love
Yeah.
that. And yeah, I grew up in a similar time because I think we're about the same age. And there just was not a time like that. I mean, the first Batman movie, and I think the first comic I picked up was a Detective Comics, and my parents got it for me while I was sick. And I remember the black suit, and I remember it through like those little action figures, the Secret
Yeah.
Wars,
Yeah.
which like you, I grew up in a very small town. It was in West Virginia. And so you would sort of find spinner racks, you would find, the occasional toy at like a hardware store because hardware stores also carry those.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
and I thought, man, Spider-Man looks cool in black. And that was kind of as far as I went with it. And then lo and behold, we would then discover Venom and Carnage and all of these things. Um,
Yeah. All this
so
stuff just perfect for like the 13-year-old.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And now they've made their way into your storytelling as well, which was one of the things that I was gonna hat tip is that I mean last pick is kind of a nice journey of nods to you've got some Star Wars references in there. You've got some of it feels very much like Ghostbusters to me. So there's definitely that aspect that it's part of who you are, so it comes out on the page.
Yeah. Yeah. For that those books in particular, all three of them, like I wasn't trying to reinvent the science fiction genre. I was wanting to take the tropes that I love so much and then hang what I think is some unique character dynamics on top of it, because I wanted the story to more be about representation in the world than a new sci-fi concept. Uh, so yeah, it helped me sort of streamline the story of like, these are things I love. This is going to be the thrust of it all. And these are the things I care deeply about representing in my stories. And that's going to be interwoven. Yeah.
And I'll just go ahead and give the bio out there for folks for the educational pitch. Here's the educational
Definitely.
pitch. So, one of the things that I love about you, among the many, it, not just including your Love and Rocket shirt, which I also love, um, the fact that you have been a special education teacher, the fact that your thoughtfulness in working with those students, with your students, has made its way into visual literature, the fact that you talked with your students in the
Mm-hmm.
process
Mm-hmm.
to sort of inform the work is also part of that I enjoy and really appreciate. And all of those things are things that we've talked about through the book project and other things that we've kind of worked on throughout the years. But then you also have educators guides, at least one educator's guide, right, on
Yep. Yep. Maybe a
site.
couple now, but yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love that educator aspect. And, folks don't have to be educators to enjoy your work, but
Mhm.
there are those nice connections there as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah. I teach 23 years. This is my, I've taken a few off to do some books for. I'm taking time off again now to do a couple books here. Always in my mind, my audience I want first are my students, whoever they are. You know, that's I've worked with teens my whole, well, most of my teaching career, and that's why I'm hoping is picking up my books. That's why I'm
Mhm.
hoping likes them. If they don't, I've maybe done something wrong. And most of my time has been special education. So it's like super important to me that I have a diverse representation. I'm dealing with, if not outright labeled disabilities, mental health issues, which is happening in this last book and the next one I'm going to be doing. Because oftentimes in special education, there's like what's called comorbid diagnoses, where you have your main diagnoses and maybe a couple others, and then you may have four or five others that are not even labeled that
Mhm.
are more mental health. It could be depression, could be anxiety, could be whatever. And I feel like those are oftentimes overlooked, and you just focus on the label where more holistic is needed.
And that affordance of speaking to mental health as well is so important because so many students, I think mental health issues have been part of the world basically forever. But there's more attention now, and so I don't know if it's that there's more or more focus or a little bit of both, but it's certainly something that impacts students that I know, and certainly something that people can look at and see in literature and go, oh, okay, I am not alone.
Right.
And this doesn't make me strange in any way that I'm having these emotions and feelings about the world because it is really normal to deal with lots of different thoughts and processes.
Yeah, and I mean, gosh, we're talking about the pandemic a lot. Maybe it's because, that's when we really got to know each other. But I mean, it's on my
Mhm,
mind a lot in this conversation, in that the world all went through something really ridiculously traumatic.
mhm,
And I feel like coming out the other side of it, those of us that fared better than others really felt like we should just sort of move on. And I think there's that expectation we put on ourselves of like, we're lucky, we're fortunate, move on, get back to work. But just taking what happened to everybody, happened to you, happened to me, whatever, like that's a lot to go through. And you don't just come through it. Most people don't come through it unscathed. Like mental health, I think, has skyrocketed, mental health concerns since then. And for many people, they're not even thinking about how they're feeling at the same time. Everybody's just running hot. Um, yeah, I don't know if that made sense, but I don't think
absolutely.
enough of us give ourselves enough attention when it comes to our mental health. We feel like we've had it all right. We got through it okay. But
Hmm.
damn, we all struggled. Yeah.
hmm Yeah. And I think normalizing that, normalizing conversations about that, normalizing, thinking about um, your mental health and talking about it is important. But then to tie it back to your book, the flip side, um, we sort of have these strange expectations, as you mentioned, around the loss of people in our lives. And one of those is that nobody says this in particular, but you kind of get it in certain ways. Like you have this time where people will sort of talk to you and they'll sort of acknowledge. And then there's almost this time at which, and it changes depending on who you are, where you are, what kind of loss you're experiencing, but people kind of go, okay, well, things
Yeah.
move on. And just because everybody else's world moves on doesn't mean that yours does necessarily. So
Right.
it's good to talk about that as well because it can. Your work speaks to these things that people should talk about, um, but they might not necessarily do that.
Yeah. 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 Thank you. I'm definitely trying. Um, Gosh, it reminds me, this whole time I've been talking, I've been trying to remember the name of this autobiography that came out this past year. I'm going to slaughter it. Oh, I'll have her name. Let me reach here. Yeah, Zoe Thorogood. I don't know how I forgot that name.
Yes, yes, love Zoe Thorogood. Yes, uh-huh.
Loneliest girl at the center of the world. Am I close?
Yes, yeah. Uh, it's lonely at the center of the earth.
Thanks.
Yes,
Lonely.
yeah.
I think about that book. I mean, I can't get her the title right, but I think about that book constantly. Of somebody so unabashedly just putting themselves out there in such an achingly painful way.
Hmm.
So well done. So all this talk about mental health, if there's anyone listening to this right now and you're curious what's out there in the world, it's a phenomenal, it's a hard read. And it's a lot of conversation about suicide, so that's a definite warning. But if you're ready for sort of uncomfortable read, it's done really well. I highly recommend that book.
Same. And thanks for shining a light on a fellow artist as well. She's going to be at Heroes Con, which is in Charlotte, North Carolina. So I'm going to try. We'll see if her table's not too busy next weekend. I'm going to try
See,
to
that's so
meet her.
funny. I would love to meet her, but like after reading her work, it's so clear how much she dislikes doing those sort of conventions. Like, so yeah, I don't know what I would say.
Yeah, that's true.
Sorry, you have to talk to me, but you're awesome.
Yeah. Thank you for your work. That's as far as I've gotten. Yeah, but totally true. Yeah. And the way that I remember that title is I think she's British. So center is spelled with the R-E. And so
That's
in my
helpful.
brain, I'm like,
That's helpful. Yeah,
yeah,
good.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Recommend her. And yeah. I also recommend anything by you as well.
Thank you.
Um, yeah, so I mentioned I'm going to a convention next weekend, which seems like a good segue to talk about things that you might have coming up. I imagine there will be a book tour sometime for you in early 2024. But anything between now and then, and I know you're inking the last parts of
Right.
Flip Side, and you have another project in the works in development.
Correct. Yeah. So inking, it'll probably be another month to a month and a half to finish the inking. And then I'm gonna color it. And I've never colored a comic before. So it's a real first. I'm a little nervous about that. Going to do it Photoshop, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Wanted to do a watercolor, but I just feel like it would take too long.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
anyway, yeah. So I don't know how long that'll take. I do know, like I said, it is coming out somewhere in 2024. We have not set the date. I bet it's towards the end. But between now and then, no. I mean, you know this probably from talking to a lot of people. Other people might not know from listening, but like most people making comics, like it's a tight budget. Very few of us are rolling in the cash. So between then and the book tour, between now and the book tour, I'm staying local. You know, some local events here, and local being Minneapolis, Minnesota. So if you're in the Midwest, yeah, I'm doing a few things here and there, but save up my money for the big tour later on. Yeah.
Do you do the virtual author visits?
Oh, I do a
Those
ton of
those can
those.
be things.
Thank
Yes,
you.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, thank you for reminding me of that. Yeah, and if you're interested, I love doing school visits, and I can do those anywhere in the world now, virtually. I am not teaching right now, so my schedule's open, and you can reach out to me through my website. I also do like book groups and stuff like that too. So yeah, those are always great. Library visits.
And great affordance, one of the nice things to come out of the past few years of thinking about zooming people in, and we're all pretty acquainted with this thing called Zoom and lots of other virtual tools. So lots of great ways to connect.
Yeah, that changed things really quickly, didn't it? This idea of like doing something virtual is just like something tacky about it almost, or like third tier. But now it's just accepted as like a totally appropriate way to talk, to communicate. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, yeah. I don't mind that aspect as well. And did I miss anything that we want to make sure to share out there into the world? I don't think so.
Well,
Since this is the third or fourth time we talked, I was going to jump in and be like, first question, what's up? What's new?
what's
And
up,
then,
man? Hey, what's
yeah,
up?
exactly.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think you hit it all. Yeah, last picks out there right now. Pretty easy to track down those three books. Otherwise, I'll be seeing everybody at the end of 2024, probably, hopefully,
Yeah,
and maybe we'll do this again.
sounds great. Sounds great. Be glad to talk with you anytime, and always glad to share about your work. And it's always a good conversation.
Thanks, Jason. I appreciate it, man.
Thank you, Jason.